When you think of industries that are rolling in money, your mind may go to the flashy, extravagant industries, luxury, fashion, and cars, Hollywood filmmaking, tech products. And while all of these industries bring in a ton of money, it doesn't necessarily mean they're the most profitable. Those Hollywood movies cost billions to make, and those cars that sell for $150,000 still cost thousands upon thousands to produce. But there are a few lucky industries that make the big bucks while costing very little in terms of production and manufacturing. And those industries top the list we're about to go over. Today, we're going to take a look at the 3 most profitable industries in the United States. We'll see exactly how much they make, how much they cost to function, and exactly how they produce all that money. Number 3. The tobacco industry. You remember those edgy commercials as a kid? A nerd walks down the street and the bad boy with the spiked hair offers him a cigarette. The nerd takes the cigarette and his whole life is over. Soon he's cutting class to toke in the parking lot. He's selling his mathletes award to fiend for those cancer sticks. He's disrespecting his parents. Schools spent a lot of money producing those ads, and Big Tobacco was still making an absurd amount of profit. That's right, the tobacco industry is the 3rd most profitable industry in the United States. In 2019, the tobacco industry had a 27.2% net margin. The 6 leading tobacco companies earned about $35.1 billion in 2019. That may come as a bit of a shock, considering that people have been smoking less and less as the years have gone on. However, there are several factors that keep the tobacco industry raking in the money. For starters, the price of cigarettes has increased dramatically over the years, and that's not just because of the new tax laws. The prices have been consciously increased by tobacco companies, and when you're addicted, you'll pay whatever the price. Producing cigarettes, cigars, and dip is relatively cheap. 533 million pounds of tobacco were harvested in 2018, and for a product that's relatively easy to grow and sells for about $1,500 per acre, well, that's a lot of money. Most of the expense with tobacco comes in with advertising, which tobacco does plenty of. In 2018, they spent $9.06 billion on advertising in the United States alone. That's equal to $25 million per day. And though tobacco has taken a bit of a backseat to vaping, that doesn't mean tobacco is earning any less. Altria, the top tobacco company, spent $12.8 billion to buy 35% of Juul Incorporated, meaning tobacco owns a huge portion of the vape craze that's sweeping the nation, or the youth at least. I can't tell you the amount of times I've smelled cotton candy clouds walking through downtown. Altria is also the parent company of several prominent tobacco companies, including Philip Morris USA, which sells Marlboro, John Middleton, which is the 2nd leading cigar producer, and USA Smokeless Tobacco Company, which is the manufacturer of Skoal and Copenhagen. Number 2. Investment managers. When you see the big wigs in New York City walking down the street, fairly often, those men and women work in finance. But the biggest of the wigs work in a specific area of finance: investment managing. Though the title doesn't sound particularly exciting, investment managing had 29.1% net margins in 2019. In total, the industry earned $3.2 trillion that same year, which is more than the GDP of California. So yes, it's an industry that sees quite a lot of wealth. But what do investment managers actually do? And how do they earn so much money? As the name implies, investment managers handle, well, investments. They work with wealthy clients to grow their wealth through diversified portfolios. They assess the risk involved in investments and monitor the investments to ensure they remain a wise decision. The average salary of this job? $100,407. But that average skyrockets as you move closer to big cities like DC, New York, and Los Angeles. Investment managers often work at hedge funds. Their fees are based on a percentage of the amount invested, meaning that investment managers have the same interests as their client. Hedge funds generally charge 20% on their returns, which means if they can turn a $100 million investment into a $200 million investment, they'd be making $20 million million. On top of that, investment managers charge a managing fee, which is typically 1 to 2% of the initial investment, which means they can make millions of dollars for just managing the money. But before you hop off and run to work at a hedge fund, know that it isn't that simple. You're required to have a degree in either business or finance, and it can often take 10 to 15 years to become trusted enough within a company to finally take over an active role as an investment manager. As I'm sure you can imagine, the expenses of investment management aren't that extreme, which only adds to their profit margin. Number 1. Pharmaceutical companies. We talked about big tobacco, but there's another big industry that's making even more money, and that's none other than Big Pharma. I know, you've heard all the controversy about them. There's conspiracy theories that are running the world and doing all kinds of crazy, wacky things, and that controversy is well documented. Pharmaceutical companies aren't well liked. It's been consistently rated the worst industry in several polls, and people were more than double as likely to say negative things about them than positive things. Even so, they're making the big bucks. And how can they not? People need medication to survive. Pharmaceutical companies had an average of 30% net margins in 2019. Between the year 2000 and 2018, 35 big pharmaceutical companies received a combined revenue of $11.5 trillion. For decades, the price of medication has been climbing and climbing. From just 2018 to 2019, 4,311 prescription drugs saw an increase in price, with an average of a 21% increase at that. Pharmaceutical companies mainly make their money by selling drugs that cost pennies to make for an insane markup, especially in the United States. The 13 largest pharmaceutical companies earn 45% of their profit from the United States alone, and it's easy to see why. In the US, Brilinta costs about $5.99 per pill, and in Canada, that same pill will only cost you about $1.67. More well-known medication like insulin is frequently wrapped in controversy and outrage for this very reason. 3 manufacturers control 96% of the world's supply of insulin. The US market accounts for 15% of their users, but almost 50% of its revenue. In other words, we're making them an incredible profit. But just how much exactly are they making? To get to the answer, we should take a look at a widely publicized story. The story of Martin Shkreli and Thiola. Thiola is a drug made for a rare kidney disease. Back in 2014, the company that produced it was bought out by another pharmaceutical company owned by Martin Shkreli. The medicine was sold for $1.50 a pill and only cost mere cents to produce, but it was hiked up to a cost of $30 per pill, and it was completely legal. In fact, even after Shkreli stepped down from his position, the company continued to sell Thiola for that price. And that, my dear viewers, is how the pharmaceutical companies make their money. They make a relatively cheap product that is absolutely necessary for survival and sell it for absolutely absurd prices. However, many people argue that these drug companies spend most of their profits testing and researching new drugs. Well, that being said, I'll leave you with this little tidbit. Over an 8-year period, the 13 leading pharmaceutical companies spent $643 billion on research. That's a lot of money. However, in that same time frame, they spent $1.04 trillion in marketing. So, there you have it. The 3 most profitable industries in the world. What do you think of how these industries make their money? Is it what you expected? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and maybe go check out some of my other social media for the one time. Well, as always, I'm Mr. Luxury. Pip pip to doodly do.